Hi everyone, I'm Mrs. Wright and I'm so excited to be learning with you today. Have you ever heard of phrases like, it's raining cats and dogs? Well, we know it's not really possible to really rain cats and dogs, right? So what does that actually mean? And what kind of language is this? When someone says it's raining cats and dogs, they mean it's raining really, really heavily. Sometimes authors will use creative language like this to make their writing even more engaging and exciting. It's called figurative language. Figurative language is used to engage readers and is not supposed to be taken literally. The two types of figurative language that we're going to be talking about today are metaphors and similes. A metaphor is a type of figurative language that directly compares two things, such as she is a gem. A simile is a comparison of two things using the words like or as, such as he was as fast as a cheetah. Today, we're going to learn about how to identify and interpret figurative language like metaphors and similes in a text. To do this, we're going to create a two-column T-chart. So you're going to need a piece of paper and a writing utensil. While you grab your items, I'll go and get mine too. I'm back with my paper and writing utensil. I grabbed a marker, but a pen, a pencil, or a crayon works fine too. Now, let's work on making our T-chart. I'm going to start by folding my paper lengthwise or hot dog style. And I'm going to unfold. Now, I'm going to draw a line down the fold. I'm also going to draw a line about 2 inches from the top of the paper that cuts across the paper widthwise. Now I have a T-chart that has 2 columns and 2 areas to write the 2 categories. Compare your T-chart to mine and make sure that they look similar. Graphic organizers, like our T-chart, help us to organize our learning, and they're a great way to record our thinking and also allow us to easily look back to remember what we learned. Since we are identifying and interpreting the use of similes and metaphors in text, let's write simile in the top left area of the T-chart. I'm going to use this big T-chart to help you see what I'm writing. So let's go ahead and write simile in the top left. And now let's write metaphor in our top right. So let's also make sure we leave enough space on our T-chart so that we have space to write our definition, okay? So when I gave you the definition of simile, the example I provided was, he is as fast as a cheetah. So with this example in mind, how might we define simile? Let's think about that. If you said something like a comparison of 2 things using the words like or as, then you're right on track and you're on the ball. Let's add that definition to our T-chart. Comparison of 2 things using like or as. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and define metaphor too. An example of a metaphor is, she is a gem. So how might we define metaphors? When I think about a metaphor, this is how I think it through. Since she is a gem compares one thing, she, to another thing, a gem, a metaphor can be defined as a direct comparison between two things. So let's write that down under the metaphor in our T-chart. Direct comparison of two things. So as we read some short text today, we're going to identify the figurative language, the meaning of the similes and metaphors that we notice, and discuss what they mean. And we're going to add them to the appropriate charts on our T-charts. I'm going to share my thinking with you for the first two short texts, and then it'll be your turn, okay? Remember to add the figurative language in the appropriate column of your T-chart. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Our first short text is, Sarah swims like a fish. How do I know if this is a simile or metaphor? I need to go ahead and look back at my definitions. Okay, so a simile is a comparison of two things using like or as, while a metaphor is a direct comparison of two things. All right, so first, I need to understand how things are being compared in this sentence. It's saying Sarah is being compared to a fish using the word like. So, beautiful, I know, it's a simile, right? I'm going to add Sarah swims like a fish to the T-chart in the simile column. So let's do that. Do that with me, friends. Sarah swims like a fish. Okay. After identifying that this short text is a simile, I want to think about what this simile actually means. So I need to pay really close attention to the characteristics of the two things being compared here. In this case, it's Sarah and a fish. And any word that tell me more about how these two things are compared is like swims. So since fish are quick swimmers, this must mean that Sarah is a quick swimmer, just like a fish. I'm going to add my interpretation of this simile below it in my T-chart. Since fish swim fast, Sarah must be a fast swimmer. So here's my figurative language. Sarah swims like a fish. I know that's a simile. And since fish swim fast, Sarah must be a fast swimmer. Let's take a look at our next short text. Here we go. Her singing is music to my ears. Is this a simile or a metaphor? When I hear her singing is music to my ears, I don't see two things being compared using like or as. Instead, it's directly comparing two things, her singing and music. And it's not using like or as. So let's go ahead and add this to our metaphor column on our T-chart. Her singing is music to my ears. So now what do we think this metaphor actually means? So the two things being compared here are her singing and music. And the words that tell me more about how they compare let me know it's not just any music, but rather it's music to my ears. When my ears hear music, it's usually a really enjoyable experience, right? Don't you like to listen to music? Right. So this metaphor must mean that hearing her music is an enjoyable experience. So that would be my interpretation. I'm gonna go ahead and add my interpretation to our T-chart. Listening to her sing is an enjoyable experience. Now, it's your turn to read some sentences with figurative language. Your job is to identify the similes and metaphors, interpret their meanings, and add them to the appropriate column on your T-chart. So here's the first one. Number 1, after we mopped the floor, it was as slippery as an eel, so we put out a caution sign. Can you identify the figurative language in that sentence? If so, shout it out to me, I'm listening. Yeah, so it is slippery as an eel, awesome. But what kind of figurative language is slippery as an eel? Go ahead and shout that out to me too, let me hear. Good job, awesome, it is a simile. Let's go ahead and add that to our T-chart. Slippery as an eel. I would not want to be over there because we might fall and hurt ourselves. So now let's interpret what this actually means. What does it mean is slippery as an eel? What in the world does that mean? Go ahead and shout it out to me when you have an idea. I'm listening. Okay, nice. That's right. The floor must have been super duper slippery because eels are sea creatures that are super wet. And we know that if it is wet, it is probably really slippery. Let's add our interpretation to our T-chart. Here we go. The floor was very slippery just like an eel. Awesome, good work. So let's go ahead and move on to our second short text. Short text number 2 says, Bria enjoyed her book so much that she felt the book was a passport to adventure. So go ahead and identify the figurative language in this sentence and shout it out to me. I'm listening. Great job, yes, it is. Book was a passport to adventure. What type of figurative language is this? Go ahead and shout it out to me. Is it a simile or is it a metaphor? Go back to your definitions and take a look at those to help you decide. Let me hear. Good job, it is a metaphor. Let's go ahead and add this metaphor to our T-chart. Book was a passport to adventure. Okay, now let's interpret what the metaphor book was a passport means. Let's think about that for a second. Go ahead and shout it out to me once you have an idea. I'm listening. Okay, awesome. So a passport is a document that we use to travel all around the world. So this must mean that it sounds like Bria's book was so great of an adventure because it let her travel in her mind as she was reading. That's so awesome. Let's go ahead and add this interpretation to our T-chart. Bria's book was such an adventure she could travel in her mind. Awesome job. Great job identifying similes and metaphors and interpreting their meaning. So as we wrap up our lesson, let's recap what we've learned. Today, we learned that similes and metaphors are types of figurative language. Similes are a comparison of two things using like or as, and a metaphor is a direct comparison of two things. We can interpret similes and metaphors by looking at what is being compared and how it's being described. Authors use figurative language to make their writing even more exciting. Thank you so much, friends, for tuning in with me today, and I look forward to learning with you all again soon. Bye!